I really love that comics are so accessible as a medium. I think part of why we're able to build such a big community in a comic shop is that, the marriage of words and pictures, which is what comics are I mean, there's such a low barrier to entry to make them and to read them. You
Right.
don't even have to speak the language. You can read a comic that you don't understand, and you can still kind of get the gist of what's going on a lot of the time just based off the pictures. For
Right.
kids who are struggling to learn how to read, or kids learning English not as their first language, it's less intimidating than a wall of text. I had been a film major, but to make a movie, you need a lot of people and a lot of money. But to make a comic, you just need a pencil and paper. Um,
Right.
and it can be, I mean, comics can be so many different things. And we see that, even though comics live in the shadow of the film industry and anime and all these other things, that they still find a way to exist, because fundamentally, just like having words and pictures is always going to be kind of an urgent human way of communication.
Hi, my name is Adam Freeman. This is Comic Industry Insiders, a weekly podcast where I get to talk to the people behind the scenes of the comic book industry, the people who make it run. And one of my personal obsessions is the folks who have been either won the Eisner Spirit of Retail Award or have been, a finalist of that. And that is who we're talking to this week. Today's guest is JACOB Shapiro, the co-owner and operator of Phantom Comics, one of the most respected independent comic shops in the country.
Oh,
Located in DuPont Circle, Phantom isn't just a store, it's a community hub built on curation, conversation, and trust. Under Jake's leadership, it's become a model for how brick and mortar retail survives, thrives, and continues in this, post-pandemic, post-whatever apocalyptic world we're living in. With experience on both the publishing and retail sides of the comics industry, JACOB brings a rare systems-level perspective on how stories actually reach readers and what breaks along the way.
oh,
I can't wait to get into this, Jake. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Wow, that's a lot of praise you've just given us.
Well,
Yeah.
we try and bring praiseworthy people on the show, so you might as well be honest about who they are.
Yeah, well, I feel like every day I'm just stressed about paying all the bills, and so it's nice, like in the, on a bigger level, it's nice to know that people are seeing the effort that we're putting in.
Yeah, that is the funny thing about that. As a small business owner myself, you do spend every single day just, you're just trying to move the ball forward and make sure that everybody stays employed tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right? That's really kind of it. It's crazy that like at the end of it, like eventually a lot of this stuff kind of builds up. But the day to day, you can't really think that way, right? It's just, how am I going to get the stuff out on the shelves?
I mean, something that I've been struggling with lately is pretty much any small business that I see that's doing really cool stuff, whether it's a comic shop or any other small business,
Sure.
pretty much always involves at least one person vastly overworking themselves and underpaying themselves. And because it's
At least one. Yeah.
yeah, at least
Yeah.
one, because we're trying to do a bunch of new things we haven't done before, but with the same small staff that we've had, and we actually just brought on a couple new part-time people, but every time you add on new employees, then it's like, well, now we've got a bigger payroll that we have to afford.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to continue doing all this while staying sane.
That's entirely true. So, in doing some research of this, one of the things I wasn't able to put together really easily is kind of the timeline, let's start with the timeline of Phantom Comics, because you bought an established store, and it has moved at least once that I could tell in its history. Can you talk about the history of Phantom Comics to begin with?
Yeah, of course. Well, first off, I did not buy into Phantom Comics, actually.
Okay.
I've gained part ownership through sweat equity. Um,
Well, you bought it then. You bought it with a much dearer payment.
I'm only a minority part owner. There's a number of other people. So Phantom started in 2005. David Bishop, who's still the majority owner, he founded it with a number of other people up in the Tenleytown neighborhood of Washington, D.C. And it's moved around a couple times. It was inside Union Station here in DC for a while, and that's where I first came into Phantom. I began working there part time in 2014, and then that summer. Actually, one of the first things I did was help them move the store across town from Union Station to DuPont Circle, where now we've been for the past 11, going on 12 years.
Right.
But I haven't been at Phantom that whole time. In 2018, I left Phantom. I moved up to New York. I worked for a number of different publishers. And then in 2023, I moved back to DC to take the shop over in a little bit more of an ownership role. I had been a really small part owner for a while, but this time I'm really kind of taking the reins and applying everything that I learned in the 5 years that I was up in New York, learning the other side of the publishing industry and applying it to my retail shop.
Right. What before we get into your timeline, which I definitely want to, because some really interesting stuff in there. Let's talk about then that move. So you were involved in the move from DuPont Circle to where it is currently, right? Talk about the two different neighborhoods or the two different locations and how they're different. How did they change what Phantom Comics was and is?
Yeah, they're very different. I mean, they're both in DC. They're both serving the community of the city as well as all the commuters and tourists who access DC. And both of them are close to the metro, public transit. But Union Station, I don't know if you've ever been to Union Station in DC, but it's got this sort of retail shopping area that they've been trying to spruce up and make it really fancy for a long time now. Just now in the last couple of years, they actually are starting to get more upscale luxury stores that they always wanted. Back when we were there, it was giving a little bit more abandoned shopping mall vibes. It's funny because it's not in it's not in an abandoned shopping mall. It's in this like really gorgeous old historic train hall building. But then you've got all these. We were originally Phantom was on the first floor of the shopping area, and then eventually we got pushed up to the second floor where it was like Hudson News and shop selling like Welcome to the USA kind of tourist merchandise. And being in a train station, we did get a lot of people that commute on Amtrak. The corridor between DC and New York is pretty much like one of the only segments of Amtrak that gets used heavily all the time, and I believe the ridership's actually gone up. So there's a lot of people who commute through there, tourists who come through there, but it is strangely like inaccessible for people in the city because it's not in a part of town that's very walking distance from anything else. So if you happen to be going through Union Station for something else, you'll stop by where Phantom is. But you wouldn't go there specifically to go shopping with your friends or something, which I think that's what they're trying to do.
Right.
When I first started working there was a Barnes & Noble inside Union Station. Barnes & Noble went out of business, turned into an H&M. H&M went out of business. Now it's Uniqlo, which is nice. At least it's a shopping store. I think all shopping retail in DC has been pretty depressing. Ever since COVID, but even before COVID. DC's got a lot of really good restaurants and bars, but it kind of suffers for brick and mortar retail. Although DC does have a long history of really great bookshops. But back to your question about the locations. We knew that we wanted to become kind of more of a third space, a community space, rather than just a retail shop. And Esther Kim, who hired me at Phantom, she's worked for a number of comics publishers, and now she works at John Carpenter's comics publisher.
Right. Storm King?
Yeah, Storm King.
Yeah.
So she's
hi, Esther.
Yeah. Hey, Esther. Esther is, without her, I wouldn't be on this call right now.
Right.
She hired me. You asked about Kansas City earlier. I had been right after college. I lived in Kansas City. I moved back to DC after those 2 years. Kind of didn't know what I was doing with my life, and I applied to work part-time at Phantom. And what struck me about what Esther was doing with Phantom was that she was really the one pushing it to become more than just a retail space and to be a community hub. She would host a bunch of, like, she started doing these, like, kind of ladies' nights at Phantom, and leaning into, creating a space for everyone in comic shops, not just traditional comic readers, which, people, on one level, it is like anyone who's not a straight white man, but also it's anyone who, like, doesn't know everything about Batman. I think a lot of people feel intimidated walking into a comic shop, and they feel like the clerk's going to judge them for not knowing enough about what's happening in the current X-Men run or something.
But that community aspect of it is really why direct market comic shops work when, as you mentioned, like the rest of brick and mortar retail is struggling.
Yeah.
Right. It's because, the ability to focus in on bringing a community together and, that weekly rotation of people showing up. I mean, it really does become that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, at the end of the day, most of what we sell, people could buy on their phone. And it's been that way for a while. We're not going to be able to order in high enough quantities to be able to match Amazon for pricing. So
of course,
how do we even survive? And it's the community, it's being the third space. And I think in our current world that we live in, where people are inside more and more people work from home, more and more stuff happens online. It's like people don't connect with other human beings, especially comic readers. There's a lot of, let's be honest, it's a lot of introverts and a lot of people who even before COVID didn't go outside that much. And it can be lonely, online community is great, but being in the same physical space as other people it's the only thing that keeps me getting out of bed in the morning sometimes.
Right, exactly. It's what we need. We have a physical need to be near each other, right?
2025 was a great year for us. It was a terrible year for the world, but we did really well. It was a growth year for us. And then being here in DC specifically, when USAID gets shut down and all these government employees get laid off, like those are my customer. That's my customer base.
Right. Right.
And so I thought when we started having all these layoffs that was going to hurt my business. But I think a lot of these people, in a time of crisis, are looking for community even more.
That has been my experience as well. With a few exceptions. I mean, you weren't in our game back in 2008, but man, that was a rough one. But every other like seemingly crisis ever since, people seem to lean into the thing that gives them connection. Right. It's that's the thing that they show up for. Talk about we're still focusing on the Phantom of it, and I promise we're going to get to the JACOB of it because I want to hear more about how we got this long strange trip of yours. But talk about the connection that you have being in DC, being so close to the federal government's hub of the U.S. and all that. We've had let's put it this politely. We've had a very dramatic couple years politically. Like, how has that affected your business as someone who is kind of in that space and, maybe not leaning into the politics of those in currently in power?
Well,
I'm trying to walk a line here. I'll let you jump over it.
We've always been politically and socially conscious at Phantom. We've always, we've been flying a pride flag outside for a decade plus. We've got a Palestinian flag in our shop. We've never tried to hide who we are. Mm-hmm. It is a fine line. There's always going to be people who disagree with us who come into a shop. But I think going back to the human connection point, I think even people who disagree with you politically, if you're face to face with those people and you just want to talk about Spider-Man, and like you're not dicks to each other, I think people are fine with that. I
think so.
We've got all this, progressive leaning stuff in our shop, but we will every now and then get tourists wearing MAGA hats coming in the shop, and we've had people who've been jerks to us, but I haven't seen any, none of the red hat wearing tourists that have come in the shop have been that way to me. So, I'm sure a lot of them avoid our shop entirely, and I guess I'm sacrificing our potential customer base a little bit because of that. But I don't know. Part of why I run a small business is that I can really stand by what I believe in, and I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is. And I think people see that, and they see that it's authentic and that it's not just virtue signaling. We try to do fundraisers whenever we can. We're just about to announce that we're going to be closed on Friday for a big nationwide strike in protest of what's going on with ICE in Minneapolis. And also, I mean, at the same time, I still just really love comics. And, if you look at our Instagram, all the events that we post, like there is political stuff in there, but that's not what's propping up our business. Like what's propping up our business is there's a bunch of great comics being published right now, and we're getting a ton of them. And we're not as big as, some of the big East Coast comic chains. I'm struck. I'll go to next month we're about to go to the Comics Pro Retailer Summit in California, and almost all the other retailers there have multiple locations. I feel like I'm in the minority of shops that are there that's just a one location shop.
Do you think so? I don't know.
I mean, I could be wrong, but as far as people I've talked to, and then also, as far as a lot of these shops are in the suburbs or rural areas where they can have huge kind of big warehouse size stores.
Oh, sure.
And for us being in a small urban location, I think it's a little bit, we're a little bit in the minority in that way as well. And so we have a kind of a different set of challenges in terms of like having a brick and mortar physical space. We don't have parking. Our shop's only 1,300 square feet. We're on the second floor above a Subway sandwich shop.
But I can tell you, having spent as long as I have with those stores as well, they will tell you that they probably envy your, walking traffic.
Yeah, that's
your ability to have a community that comes together into a space above a sub. Because if they'd have put theirs above a Subway shop in the middle of whatever downtown is in the middle of, rural town, Nebraska, like they never would have been able to do it because the people won't show up for that.
Yeah. I think I would say around half of our customer traffic is tourists, which is really good. There's times that it goes more one way or the other. But we find that a critical part of keeping us in business is that we serve the tourists, but then we also serve local people who live and work in DC. And as you said, we're able to build community because where we are in a downtown close to public transit is even people who don't live nearby, it's easier for them to get to where we are, whether they have a car or not.
I feel that. Having run a shop in a very suburban area and lived as long as I did in New York and in Brooklyn and in those environments, and then now living in the suburbs again, I can tell you it is really difficult to communicate how different those lives are, right? To somebody who has only ever experienced one of them, it's really difficult to communicate how different it can be.
Yeah, but but despite all that, it's I feel like sometimes in our current climate they try to depict cities as these kind of like hellscape kind of places, and I think there are a lot of differences, but also at the in our core, we're all people. We all just want to talk about how cool absolute Batman is.
I want to double tap on that only because, and this is more personal than anything else, so I apologize. This interview's about you, and I don't know why I'm doing this, but I'm going to do it anyway because I feel like there's something interesting here. I'm having this conversation online right now, and a few retailers have actually popped up in the conversation about it. You mentioned what's happening in Minneapolis, and there's a lot of conversation around there. And I try not to be real public about my political views, but in this particular instance, it did feel like I wanted to weigh in a little bit. But what I realized in the conversation that we were having was people's political views tend to be the least interesting thing about them. Right? If you get to know somebody, whether or not they believe in this president or that president, or what this economic policy or that economic policy, it's usually the least thing the most interesting about them. Usually, it's what they do. It is more interesting than what they believe. right? And it sounds to me like you've really developed that line of saying, look, this is what we believe, but you be you.
Yeah, I mean,
Am I wrong about that?
no, not at all. That's a great way of putting it. I think what resonates with people about when we take political stances on issues isn't necessarily the stance itself, but it's the fact that, like, in a world where, I don't know, corporations put on, like, for Pride Month, they'll do the rainbow colored version of their logo and that's it. That, like, I don't know, that I think people can tell that it's authentic and tell that there's humans behind it, and that, like, our social media is not AI generated.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's just the humanity of all of it, which is the same with the comics. I mean, there's certain comics that are always going to sell well at our shop, but one of the things I love about comics is that the best selling thing at each store can be so different from store to store based on what the people in the store like. And so people love that we talk about comics that we really care about, and get them excited about it. And they could get their Amazon recommendations for what books they're going to read, or just but we're able to kind of, I don't know, motivate them in a way that the algorithm doesn't sometimes.
That's true. I definitely believe that. All right, so let's get into, you run basically you're running a community kind of comic shop. I assume you have pull lists, and you talk about the events that you have and that sort of thing. But you're also in a very tourist heavy part of the world. Talk about how that shifts your ordering patterns, as it would be different from, say, that place in rural town, Ohio, we were talking about earlier.
I would not say that it changes what we order that much. I think people who are visiting from other places, I mean, they want to read comics too. I try to find, we stock all the things that the tourists have heard of, but this affects our local customers and our tourist customers, that we have put a big focus on indie comics, self-published comics, and local creators. And, it appeals to our local customers because we're supporting the local art scene. And then it appeals to tourists because comic nerds from other cities, they can buy the Batman in their hometown comic shop, but they can't buy this, like, weird self-published thing that we've got. I think everyone can appreciate that. And I think people like to see, what we have on offer. And for tourists visiting from other countries, comic shops are very much are very American in a way. Even in countries that have a lot of comics, a lot of times you still buy those comics in bookstores or in other locations, and they don't have, direct, like, specialty comic shops that, like, comics are the main thing they sell. There's a ton. I would say most of the world doesn't have those. So for our tourists, it's like coming to buy a comic is like their, I visited America thing, which, I guess will be tough because in the coming years, a number of international tourists we're going to get, we'll see.
Politics will shift that for you. Yeah. Well, we'll see. We'll see where that goes. I have faith.
The other thing is that we're not leaning entirely on that. Our contingency plan for that is we also have an incredibly strong, loyal local customer base, and our pull lists. I feel like people always love to talk about how single issue periodical comics are dying, but they are still a huge.
Yeah.
Without those, we wouldn't be in business still.
I know. Listen, I've been in this business. I got the job working in a comic shop in 1994. Now, granted, from 94 to around 99, the single issues were really hurting. They were getting beaten up. But shortly after there, it shifted. But every single year, there's somebody. Usually somebody at the beat, I'll be honest, Heidi, what's up, who's talking about how comics, single issues are dying. They're going to die. They're going to go away. It's going to happen. Yeah.
Oh, Heidi is one of my favorite people. When I lived in New York, I would go to Mets games with her.
Oh, yeah? That's excellent.
Yeah. I'm being from D.C., I'm a Nationals fan, and they play the Mets all the time.
I've never been to a Mets game with her, but I've had every so often we're like, we're overdue for lunch. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that it was Brian Hibbs wrote a piece, I think, on the beat that was the thing that first kind of taught me why single issue comics are still valuable.
Oh yeah.
So I think when I first got into the comics industry, I was one of those people who felt like, well, why don't they just put everything straight to graphic novel? That's like, especially because my personal reading interests are a little bit more independent and less superhero focused. And, most Image books, they know, even when they put out the single issues, they know that it's going to sell way better in trade than in the singles. So then in a way, it's like, well, then what's the point of even doing the single issues? But I think it was that Hibbs piece that first really convinced me the value of, that like it's not cannibalizing the sales of the graphic novel to put out in the single issues. And in the meantime, it's like it gets the artist rent paid while they're waiting for their trade paperback sale, profits to come
Not
in.
to mention all those cover artists.
Yeah.
They're all getting money now.
And then for and that like there's the whole collector market aspect of single issues, and it's not really the same with trades. But then for us, our biggest customers are all the people, coming in buying a ton of single issue comics, and our most frequent, people that are coming in every week. And that's, you cultivate that with single issues in a way that you can't really with regular books. Regular prose bookstores, they definitely have their diehard customers, and I'm sure they've got their ways of having people come in every Tuesday when new books come out. But I think that with floppy single issue monthly comics, I feel like it's almost like a ritual in a way that you maybe don't have in a more traditional bookstore, which is really interesting because now, with the death of Diamond and comic shops having to pivot to ordering from traditional book distributors, I think in some ways we're having to evolve our businesses to operate a little bit more like a traditional bookstore.
Yeah, in that multiple vendors and having to understand where all the different sources of it all. Yeah, I can see that, right? You do have to become a bit more like that.
Yeah.
But I will say that in my experience, the independent bookstores are having to become more like comic shops as well. Like there is that sort of hybridization that's happening overlapping for all of them. So,
yeah. I think I think for all comic shops and all kind of small business brick and mortar places in general, I think they're all learning that leaning into the community is what we need to do.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise, people will just do it in their Google Glass. I don't know.
And then just exactly, I will push 3 buttons on this magical device I have in my pocket, and it will show up tomorrow, and I will give it no more thought.
Yeah,
right? Just like I do with everything else that I do.
Yeah, and I think that the farther we go into an AI hellscape, I think the more value people will put on things that are clearly created by humans.
And we're seeing that. We're seeing that the younger generations are beginning to really lean into physical media in a way that is surprised the hell out of me. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Having cool stuff is a universal thing that goes through the ages, through generations, and I think it goes through all of human history too.
Because when you invite people over to your apartment, you don't want them to have to say to them, "Here, put these glasses on." It will make a difference.
Yeah. Because otherwise we just heading towards our future. We're all just living in tubes, right? I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah, it's Wall-E. Yeah, exactly. All the way down. All right. Well, so let's talk about the long, strange trip that got you to where you are. You're not. I'm being a grizzled old man. All I see is youth when I look at you. But you've had like 4 different careers at this point inside of the comics world. Talk about how that path began.
Yeah, thanks for asking. I'm 36 years old, and I think anyone my age has had to learn that careers are not a straight line. And I think that the younger generation is learning that even more so.
100%.
Our parents' generation, where they could work at one company for 40 years and that would be it, I think doesn't exist anymore. And I've, and like having the ego death of feeling like your career's stalling out and then starting again, doing something else, or going backwards and doing something that you thought you did before. And sometimes it's also, you have to learn to not get your self-worth entirely from what you do for a living.
Ooh, that's good. Say more about that. Say more.
Yeah, well, so I went to school. I went to George Mason University. It's a big public university in Virginia. I chose it because it was the closest one to DC. And I majored in film, which George Mason is a great school, but not known for its film program. And being in the DC area, it was really training me to become like a cameraman for a news broadcast or something, and that was not really what I wanted to do.
No, that's not where you were going to
Um,
go.
so I graduated. I didn't know what I was doing. The girl that I was dating at the time got a job as a teacher in Kansas City, Missouri, and I was like, well, I don't know what else I got going on, so I'll go with you. Uh, Moved out there. I ended up, being into film and majoring in film. And all through high school, I worked part time at movie theaters. And then when I moved to Kansas City, I got a job as the manager of this little art house movie theater that shut its doors just within the last year or two. Tivoli Cinemas in Westport, RIP. It was like a real, one of the last remaining kind of real art house cinemas. Maybe, one of the last ones in Kansas City for sure. It just had 3 auditoriums. And when all 3 of the theaters had movies playing in them, I wouldn't have anything to do. And, I was in this city that I didn't know anyone there. I didn't really have friends. But working in the box office of the theater, someone had left a bunch of old Vertigo comics and a bunch of old like Cosmopolitan magazines and Marie Claire and some other fashion magazines, all just like piled up in the box office. And when the movies were all going, I didn't have anything to do in the box office until the people, until the theaters were let out and people were going to the next one. So I would just sit behind the box office and I would read a bunch. It would be like Preacher. And which, in a weird way, it wasn't even my Preacher. It's a great comic, but it didn't strike me as my favorite thing. But I think something about the medium struck me. I grew up loving Calvin and Hobbes and reading the comic strips in the Washington Post every day as a kid. It breaks my heart that because of ownership changes, I had to end my Washington Post subscription a couple years, and they got rid of all their, editorial cartoonists and everything like that. But that's a whole other conversation. Anyway, I grew up reading a ton of newspaper strip comics, but not really comic book comics until I got to Kansas City right after college. There's that daily newspaper strip Spider-Man comic, and as a kid, I always thought that was the Spider-Man comic because it says Stan Lee on it. And it moves 3 panels at a time. He's got that great, really curly hair. That was Spider-Man to me as a kid. And then when I picked up these random Preacher volumes and other like kind of late 90s, early 2000s Vertigo books, it was, I don't know. I think I really love that comics are so accessible as a medium. I think part of why we're able to build such a big community in a comic shop is that, the marriage of words and pictures, which is what comics are there's such a low barrier to entry to make them and to read them. You don't even have to speak the language. You can read a comic that you don't understand and you can still kind of get the gist of what's going on a lot of the time just based off the pictures. For kids who are struggling to learn how to read, or kids learning English not as their first language, it's less intimidating than a wall of text. I had been a film major, but to make a movie, you need a lot of people and a lot of money. But to make a comic, you just need a pencil and paper. And it can be, comics can be so many different things. And we see that, even though comics live in the shadow of the film industry and anime and all these other things, that they still find a way to exist because fundamentally just like having words and pictures is always going to be kind of an urgent human way of communication. I eventually made friends. My coworkers at the Tivoli in Kansas City were fantastic. I miss them. But really, I got myself into comics. After that, I just Googled. I think that was like 2012, 2013. And I just Googled like best comics of 2012. And here's Saga. What's that? I know, ironic because of what I do now, but I ordered online like the first trades of all these things that all these random internet lists said were the top comics. And I kind of sent myself down a rabbit hole. I went into Clint's Comics on Main Street in Kansas City, and which, it was kind of your more old school shop. I remember I was able to pick up, what is it? Miles Morales' first appearance. I think it's Ultimate Fallout #4 or something. But I didn't feel like I was welcome to spend a ton of time there. So I stuck to my box office reading, which I learned years later that I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong about this. You can remove this if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure Clint from Clint's Comics got killed by one of his customers, like after I left. That there was like some sort of disagreement uh, between Clint and the customer, and ended in his death. So
So
all
being
right,
the surly comic book guy
yeah,
ended in him. What?
yeah, and that it wasn't a random person, it wasn't a random criminal. It was like one of his customers. Anyway, so but
Okay.
after that, I kept up with comics, and after 2 years in Kansas City, Kansas City was great, but I knew I didn't want to spend the rest of my life there. So I moved back to DC, my hometown, and started applying to part-time jobs. And one of them was at Phantom Comics in Union Station, and running this little kind of struggling art house movie theater, small business. Being the manager there, definitely some of the skills got translated to running a comic shop. And I had, just within the last, I had the 2 years in Kansas City. I was kind of my comics education in a way. That was when I read, new and old comics. I read a ton. And Esther took a chance on me. When I first started there, I was splitting my time, also working part-time at a movie theater in DC.
Okay.
But I knew that Phantom was where I wanted to be. I love comics, and I loved what Esther was building with the shop. And so eventually I convinced her to make me full-time, be a manager there. Eventually I was working enough hours that the Phantom couldn't afford to pay me overtime. So they said, well, if we make you a part owner, then then you don't get overtime pay. So like, well, we can't pay you more, but like we could just give you some part ownership. It was like really, it was like 3%. It was maybe it was even less than 3% ownership. It was very small.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it looked good on my resume to say that I was part owner of this business. And Dave Bishop, the majority owner, and everyone else there, I think I really love that they've let us do what we want to do with the shop. Whether when it was Esther doing it, but also when I'm running it myself. Dave's the majority owner, but he's kind of trusted me to make judgment on all the day-to-day and long-term parts of the store, as far as product ordering, staffing, event organizing, everything. There's times that he'll push back on me for sure, but I think ultimately he'll push back on me. But then if I still really think that it's what we need to do, I'll still do it.
Yeah.
And so so I've been grateful to him for that. And I've never really had a boss like that anywhere else that I've worked, where I feel like I have pretty close to complete professional freedom in what I'm doing.
It's just lazy, right? He just doesn't care anymore. He's like, do whatever you want.
Well,
just go do it.
I think part of why I do this is part of why I work in a comic shop is I always struggled working office jobs, or like because it's hard for me to sit at a desk for 8 hours a day answering emails, and I think I'm a naturally outgoing person. One of my professional strengths is I'm good at talking to strangers. And that doesn't translate as well when it's just emailing people all day.
I can tell you that I think I have this like personal theory, because we do so much consulting with people who want to do comics that come in from outside other industries or whatever, and many times they're like, why is this so complicated and hard? And eventually I after having to describe it to them, how we got here, and I realized, because this is an entire industry that is built by the people who could not deal with corporate structures. Like, none of us did really well inside of those big corporate structures where we had, our lanes, and we stayed in our lanes and we did our thing. No, we're all creative. We all wanted to try new things. We all wanted to experiment, and some things stuck and some things didn't, and some things we just don't do anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, 100%. 100%.
It's an entire industry of us. It's always going to be hard.
Oh no. Yeah. Do we all have ADHD?
100%. When there's an Adderall dry up, man, the entire industry crashes.
I don't know. Yeah, I've always struggled in more corporate work structures, and being in a small business, I feel like I'm able to do stuff that I care about, talk about things that I care about, and that eventually I got to the point that I was managing the store with an owner that was trusting me to do what I think is the right thing to do for the business. But I think after a while, it was, there was a while that it was me and Esther running the shop together. And then she got headhunted away by a comics publisher, and she left.
That happens. And I have to apologize because I've been involved in some of that headhunting. I have to apologize to my retailer friends. Yes, we headhunt from your staff. There's no way you're going to stop it. We can't find them anywhere else.
You don't have to apologize. I think it's fantastic because the downside of working at a comic shop is that, it's like, yeah, it's great. I'm not working in an office, but also like we're never going to make that much money, and especially the part-time employees, like they're never going to, it's going to be tough to make a living just doing that forever. And I want my staff to be able to spread their wings and do other stuff.
Right.
And so then it's what I did too. Esther left, and I was running the shop as kind of the sole manager after that. But I definitely reached a point where I was starting to feel burnout from doing it all myself. Eventually, I decided in 2018, I left. I moved to. I felt like, well, I've hit my ceiling. Am I just going to slowly turn into comic book guy from The Simpsons, and be like, this is it. This is it for the rest of my life, just running this little comic book store. And so I'm like, well, I guess if I want to have a big boy job, I should get into publishing. And even outside of comics, I've always loved New York City since I was a little kid, and it's not that far from DC. So I moved up to New York to try to get into publishing there. And I worked at the first. I tried applying to publishers in New York before I moved there. Didn't hear anything back from anyone. My lease was running up at my apartment, and I'm like, well, so yeah. I had been at Phantom for 4 years at that point, and a college education's worth of retail experience at Phantom, and so I wasn't getting any bites there, but my lease was running out at my apartment. I'm like, well, I guess am I going to stay a whole other year? Like, I'm not getting any younger. I just got to, and some of these industry people, they get the publishing jobs right out of college. And like, what am I doing? So I moved up. I actually got a job. I really didn't want to work retail again so soon, but I got a job working at the Strand bookstore in New York, which is the biggest and oldest independent bookstore in New York, and one of the biggest and oldest ones in the country. And they hired me specifically to work, like, focusing on working in their comics section.
Oh, perfect! Right.
And yeah, it was a grind. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about the publishing industry at large. With working in being a bookseller at large. The Strand is I don't want to get into it too much. The Strand's had a lot of kind of behind the scenes drama over the years of how it's run. But even with the issues with how it's run, it's like the staff is, I'm so thankful to all the different people who I had met while I worked there. I mean, it's people doing all sorts of different things with their lives too. But after a year working there, I finally was able to get a job working for the U.S. office of Nobrow / Flying Eye Books, British publisher. It was my friend Jeff, who now works for Mad Cave Studios, but at the time was the head for a long time he was at the U.S. office for Nobrow. And I had, over the years of going to comics festivals, going to FPX and TCAF in Toronto, Mocha Fest in New York, I kind of got to know him, and he knew, when I moved to New York, I told him I was there, and eventually he was like, oh, are you still looking for a job? And I was able to get a job. It was just me, and with the whole U.S. office for this British publisher was just me and him. And they had leased this like really small office space in this big old fancy office building in downtown Manhattan. And and I actually remember that I got that job like right around the time that I turned 30. And at the time I was definitely having a bit of crisis about, what it means to turn 30. And when I got the job in publishing, it was like, oh, I finally did it. I did the thing that I came here to do. And like I finally have a respectable big boy job. You know, I'm 30, but like I didn't fail because I finally I got this. Um,
Sure.
and then a few months later, COVID happened.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yeah. So they shut down the U.S. office and then shortly laid me off. And yeah, now since then, Nobrow, they don't have any U.S. office anymore, and now they've entirely rebranded as Flying Eye Books, which is formerly their Nobrow's children's books imprint, but they pivoted pretty much entirely to kids' books, which is part of why they changed their name. Um, anyway, so I didn't I didn't know what to do after getting laid off. You know, it made me think like, should I have just stayed at the Strand? You know, right before I left the Strand, they had offered me like a higher position there, and I turned it down because I wanted to be in publishing. And I through Isabel Rojas, a cartoonist who we published at Nobrow. She has two kids graphic novels called The Adventures of Teen Palm. They're fantastic. So I met her while I was working at Nobrow. I was doing sales and marketing for them because I guess running a comic shop qualifies you to work in sales and marketing. And
Guilty.
you know,
Sure.
I guess that's what I do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you know, so I had worked on the marketing for her books, and she knew I was looking for a job after the layoffs, and she pointed me to the Mysterious Bookshop, which is I think the oldest and only. I mean, not the only, but it's a very historic old mystery fiction bookstore in Tribeca in Manhattan. And yeah, I mean, there's not very many mystery specialty bookshops in the whole country. And it's an interesting shop because it's not just a bookstore; it's also a publisher. The owner, Otto Penzler, is, for people who are into mystery fiction, he's a big figure in the mystery publishing industry. He's been a long time editor. He's done a bunch of like best crime short stories of the year. He's done a lot of that. And so he runs he ran Mysterious Press that we used to be parts of other publishers, but then he bought it back and made it his own thing under his Penzler Publishers imprint. So half the business was the bookstore and half the business was his mystery publishing imprint. And he hired me to work on the publishing side of things, doing the sales, marketing, and publicity for his mystery novels. It was kind of a surreal time because this was a peak COVID lockdown. It's a small business. The publishing office is just in the basement of the bookstore, and Otto Penzler is this. I mean, he was this in his 80s kind of old white guy who grew up in the Bronx, who's also like a Republican and a native New Yorker Republican, which is kind of its own. I don't know. For people who have not been to New York City, you think that everyone in New York is a bleeding heart liberal, but it's not true. And I think that, I mean, going back to, we had talked earlier about, how is it to be politically vocal and still, work a business is, I mean, him being a lifelong political conservative living in New York City, I think he had to grow up, I mean, he spent his whole life kind of knowing that most people who he worked with disagreed with him vehemently on most stuff.
Yeah.
And I disagree with him on a lot of things. But I think deep down in his soul, he's a good person. And yeah, I mean, he took a chance on me. He knew that he hired me over the phone during peak COVID lockdown. It was just me and him, and I had one other person who was my kind of direct boss I worked with, but that person was not coming into the office because it was COVID. I was like the only person who they talked to that was willing to walk into, I was living in, I guess I was living in Manhattan at the time, and it was easy enough for me to get down there,
Gotcha.
and commute in when no one else would. So it ended up just being me and Otto Penzler, the publisher of this whole company, kind of this kind of famous mystery publishing guy. And I don't even have any background in mystery fiction.
Right.
I have a comics background. And he always looks at, he still looks down on it. He kind of looks down his nose at comics as like not real publishing, which for me, I always felt like mystery novels and comics have a shared DNA of being pulp fiction and being kind of, like crime novels. People also look down on those as being not real art. It's just pulp stuff. But, they have some shared identity there.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think on some level he understands that. Anyway, so I worked for him there, but it was, he had just bought his company back from his publishing company back from, I forget who had been the publisher that it was an imprint of before. I think it went through a few different companies, and he basically was like having me run everything, and I had only been an assistant for less than I think I was at No Prof for maybe 11 months before COVID happened and they laid me off. So it was basically he put me in the driver's seat of all the sales, publicity, and marketing for this company, this kind of new company in an industry that I wasn't even really directly familiar with. Did
you sink or swim? You dropped you in the deep end.
I think I swam. I mean, they're still around. They're doing good stuff. They're growing. I think I did well. I did well given what I had. I learned a lot, but it was also he kind of just left me. He was busy doing a lot of other things.
Right.
And also a huge part of his business was every week he sends a rare book email list to his listserv of people that he knows collect like Agatha Christie first editions. Okay. And I think that was because Phantom is not a variant cover collector market kind of shop. We're more of like a buying, people buying the comics because they want to read them sort of shop. And so that was my first time really being exposed to the collector market in publishing and seeing how he had built that up pretty much just through his own personal connections over the years. That like there's not that many collectors of raffles, but I know, but the one of them who is there, who lives in Australia, who's the one who will buy the $10,000 book. There's not many of those people, but I know that one guy, and so I can send the email and he'll buy it. And that was a huge part of his business. And I think when he he's still working. I think when he retires eventually, it will be very difficult to replicate what he was able to do. And it was just a Word document attached to an email that went out at once a week. Anyway, I think that was, so in a lot of ways, I think working there was a big inspiration for me, maybe even more so than when I worked at an actual comics publisher. And because I got to see the publishing side of things, and I also got to see the retailer side of things of running a bookstore and how you can do it as a small business, because he was running all of it himself.
That's got to be inspiring. And we have a regular conversation in our crew that networking is like the compound interest of a career, right? All the people that you meet, they're all like your relationship with Esther, right? Every time you need to work with one of the publishers that she's at, or you need to know somebody who is at a publisher she was maybe at previously, you can give her a call because she was there and she knows how those things work.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's because of those connections, you maintain those connections, and that becomes the compound interest that keeps you going. For him, it's, I can make a phone call and find a $10,000 sale, right? That kind of stuff just grows over time in a career. It's, part of why you stay in something even that seems so like, I don't know, genre. I mean, obviously, owners of mysterious bookshops look down their nose at us, but why you stay here is because, you build that network, and that gives you the strength to be able to do new and different things.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And also I love that for as much as the internet changes, that sending emails is still kind of a fundamental part of running a good business. And having a good weekly email blast is just like, that is always going to be a good thing.
The value, it doesn't even matter at this point what your following list is on any given social media platform. What really matters is how long is your email list, right? It is that, because that's the only real connection we have to people anymore. Yeah. We don't have their physical addresses anymore.
Yeah. Well, sorry to be, I guess I'm being a little long-winded about this origin story.
No, it's good. I like it. This story is good. But what I love about it, though, is that you did learn so much in that sort of hybridization of publishing and retail that seemingly pushed you back into retail, right? Is that how that worked?
So there, I mean, I was not really doing much of the like retail bookstore side of things. I would every now and then I would help with stuff, but for the most part, I was working in that basement doing, and then also I ended up kind of being Otto's personal assistant in a lot of ways too. I made a lot of photocopies. I converted a lot of Word documents to PDFs and vice versa. And
went out for the lunch order a few times.
Yeah,
I guess.
And
yeah.
Also, he publishes a lot of mystery short fiction, like short story collections, and a lot of them are taken from old like Ellery Queen magazines. These like old mystery magazines, and a lot of them are surprisingly like still not digitized anywhere. And a lot of them, it would be like he would have the only copies of some of these old mystery magazines, and there I would be on the scanner myself scanning in these old Ellery Queen magazines with like some of the pages kind of cracking and coming apart while I'm scanning it, but it must be done.
At least it's finally digitized, right?
And sometimes I would have to like sometimes I'd have to transcribe stuff myself too. It was, but it was. I mean, I learned a ton from doing that.
I bet.
But while all this very inspiring stuff was happening, at the same time, I was very deeply depressed about my comics career. I felt like, well, I guess I'm just like, this isn't my. I still, I learned a lot about crime fiction, but it's still not my passion. It's still not my expertise at all.
Sure.
And I think I always knew in my gut that like I don't know if this is. If I don't know if I will be able to make a career out of this, I could have stayed there, I guess. But I think I don't know. I think I always knew that wasn't quite for me. And I knew it was a job that I could have just kept doing the same job for forever and make decent money, but not ever feel like I don't know. Yeah. Not ever feel like I got what I was really looking for out of my career.
You could have lived in Tribeca until whatever happened in the mysterious bookshop after he dies. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I think, Charles, who runs the publisher, and I think Ryan, who runs the bookstore side of things. I think the staff who works there now, I think they are going to be inheriting the business, which is really cool. That's really great. And there is part of me that wonders if like that could have been me too.
It could have been me. You could have been part of the mysterious bookshop.
Yeah. But instead, I guess I got the call that Jeff, my old boss at the Nobrow U.S. office, I heard he had stayed on after I got laid off, but he decided to leave the company, and I kind of heard through the grapevine that he was leaving, and so I'm like, well, do I do it? This was a year and a half later, right? They laid me off, and I think about 18 months later, I reached out to them, said, hey, I heard Jeff's leaving. I'm still here. I'm trying to get back into comics. Would you be interested? And Nobrow brought me back on. So they brought me back on, but then for my second go around, it was entirely work from home. There was no office anymore. And I was the boss of the whole U.S. office. It was me and one other person in the U.S. office, and and I got to go to comic festivals. I went to the American Library Association conference, the Texas Library Association conference. But for the most part, it was working from home on a laptop, and
sure.
Then less than a year after that, they laid me off a second time.
You should have seen it coming.
My one consolation, and I would advise this to anyone who is taking on a job anywhere, is when they hired me back the second time, when they were negotiating my contract, I made sure that they would give me adequate severance pay if I ever got laid off again, because I had been laid off before. And so I was able to negotiate 6 months of severance pay in the case that I got laid off again. And it was also I mean, they're a British company, and there definitely are some interesting uh, business culture differences in how American companies are run and how British companies are run. And a lot of
Yeah.
that affects how pay works and how severance works and stuff like that. So I had to advocate for myself to get that, and I should have known because then, yeah, I think both of my stints at No Brow, they may have both been less than a year. Maybe one of them was slightly more than a year. Um, but yeah, yeah, that's when, I mean, because before they had just laid me off and made my former colleagues work from home. But then after that, at that point, they laid me off the second time because they weren't doing too well. I guess they were thinking about pivoting to children's books, um, and they brought on someone who was going to be was going was going to do all of the U.S. stuff just from their office in London, and yeah, so I got 6 months severance pay. I got laid off, and I'm so thankful that I had that 6 months to figure out what I was doing with my life. Um,
Yeah. Makes all the difference,
yeah,
right?
I think I've lived close to paycheck for pretty much my entire adult life. I'm just now, within the last year, I'm like not in credit card debt for the first time. Um, and so yeah, I think for anyone who has to work constantly to pay the bills, yeah, I don't think you don't have. Sometimes you need time off to figure out what your priorities are in your career and in your life. Um, and so I started applying to other jobs. I had friends that suggested like, well, if you did sales and you do sales and marketing, if you did sales and marketing for like a different industry, you could probably make a lot more money than doing it in the comics industry. Um, which is true. So I started applying
Yeah.
to sales and marketing jobs around New York in other industries. But I think while as I sent the applications, like I knew that I would hate all of these. I knew that I would struggle at all these jobs. I knew that none of the jobs were jobs that made me excited to do any of them. Um, it was a lot of like marketing firms for, I don't know, like doing cool, uh, cool ads around. New York has a bunch of cool billboard ads and ones that like kind of look like they were like hand spray painted,
Sure.
but the realistic. And I could like, oh, that's cool. I like graffiti. I could do marketing for that, right? Um, but I think I came to realize that I hate working in sales and marketing. I think the I think it's one of the worst things about working in a business in a lot of ways. I think I
You're
went
making me
from
depressed, man.
when I was running Phantom, it was like I was hand selling comics I cared about to people, and then when I was
Yeah.
working for a publisher, it was just sending email blasts all day and maximizing our SEO and placing Publishers Weekly ads and making sure our Amazon listings look correct. Um,
Yeah.
and it was like the whole reason I work in comics was that I hate that is like I struggle with sitting at a computer answering emails all day, and suddenly I was sitting at a computer answering emails all day.
Yep.
And not to mention that the whole marketing side of things is like those are the jobs that AI is gonna take. Um, among a ton of
You're
other
not
stuff.
wrong.
Um,
Yeah.
so I mean, at
Yeah.
least in the format that it has kind of traditionally been known, I think marketing is always a thing that people need, and people need human connection in their marketing.
Sure.
People always respond to marketing that you can tell that a real person made. Um, but it's just an entirely different thing. And I also knew that I mentioned earlier. I think that I'm an extroverted person, and that's like one of my big professional strengths. I knew that my jobs working for as doing marketing for publishers was a job that was not leaning into my own professional strengths. Um, I working at Phantom, I don't want to get too cocky, but I at least feel like I'm very good at my job, and I think when I was working for publishers, I never truly felt like I was good at my job, and I had to decide if that was like a personal failing or what. Um, and
Yeah.
so at the time tax season came around, I've still been a part owner of Phantom, so the majority owner of Phantom called me up and was talking about the situation there. In the meantime, while I was in New York, they went through COVID peak quarantine era without me, and they were still in business, which I'm very thankful for. I'm very grateful to all of them for being able to manage to being able to manage Phantom through 2020 and make it through on the other side. Okay. I know a lot of shops quarantine time was really great for them because they suddenly people were able to like lean into their mail order and web order businesses in a way they hadn't before. But Phantom was, I think, was a little too short staffed and had not quite built up their web order infrastructure or something enough. And the years after COVID were not great for Phantom. But when I left, I definitely felt guilt that I had not left like someone to run. I didn't have a clear successor really. Soretti, who runs the shop with me now, she's 24, 25 now, but she was 17 when I left DC the first time. If she had been a few years older, I would have entrusted the whole store to her when I left, but she wasn't. So, so I think there was a series of different people who kind of stepped up to the plate to hold the shop together in the 5 years that I was in New York. But I think it was struggling a lot, and that's what I had heard from Dave when he talked with me on the phone after I'd been laid off from Phantom, and I think I love New York. It made me incredibly sad to leave New York in a lot of ways. Because I had been there for 5 years. I definitely had reached the point that I kind of felt like, this is where I'm going to be for the rest of my life. But I still love DC. It's my hometown. And I kind of knew that they had not quite had anyone to step up as the manager to kind of make Phantom live up to sort of all the community stuff, which was our strength before COVID. COVID wiped out all of the events programming we had, and people left DC. And there's a lot of transplants in DC that are from other places. And after COVID happened, a lot of those people, they left. They did, they went back to other places, did other jobs. A lot of the customers who had been the core of our community before COVID, they weren't even really around anymore. Or if they were working from home now, and they weren't coming into the city, coming downtown, coming into the shop. So anyway, I felt at that time I was at a critical juncture. I knew that I only had 6 months of severance pay to get me through. And I knew that I hated all these marketing jobs in New York I was applying for. So I asked if I could come back to Phantom, and they said, okay. So I did.
It was the place you were meant to be. So how has Phantom changed since you've been back?
It's, in some ways it's changed a lot. In some ways it's exactly the same. This was 2023 that I moved back. And I think kind of the biggest obvious change that people can see in the time that I've been back is that our events programming has come back in full force. I mean, even more so. We're at a point now that we have an event happening at Phantom almost every single day of the month, every month. And it ranges from book clubs to art workshops to gaming tournaments. We host Magic the Gathering, Dungeons and Dragons. We've recently started selling Warhammer. That's a whole other part of our business too, although we're still primarily a comic book store.
Right.
And so I'm kind of just leaning into the kind of the heritage of what Phantom is, but just doing it kind of with renewed passion. I think after everything that happened to me in New York, I think it put more of a fire under my ass to kind of, I think all the negative things that I felt about my time in publishing, I think definitely, I would say that I did have a chip on my shoulder to kind of prove that that I'm good at my job.
That retail is a real business.
Getting laid off twice by the same company definitely makes you question yourself.
Yeah, it does. It's like getting broken up with by the same partner.
Yeah,
more than once,
and then they get back with you just to break up with you again. Why do we even do this?
Because you like abusing me. That's why you gotta get out of there. So let's dig in. So you guys are focused in. This is a really nice section to talk about. One of the reasons why we're having this conversation is you were a finalist this last year in the Eisner Spirit of Retail Award. And that is an award that made a huge difference in my life. You can see right there,
Hey.
our trophy. But you know, for me, that was 10 years before you discovered comics, so that's how long it's been. What I've noticed over the years is that they really hit hard on a few subjects that are the reason why you would get to be a finalist. So I'd love to like talk through some of those subjects, and we can kind of dig in. First up is how big is your store?
It's 1,300 square feet.
1,300 square feet. All right, so a reasonable size, but not huge, right? Not 2,000 square feet. I would say, if I had to guess, that's probably close to an average. So on the smaller side of average, right? Okay. In that space, you have obviously you're starting to branch out into gaming and that sort of thing. Do you have you said you guys really focus in on alternative and independent press, that sort of thing. Can you talk about how you choose that? What does your product mix look like?
It's a mix of everything. We love indie self-published stuff, but I think very critically, we still love superhero comics. I think shops, I think with this kind of archetype of the old school comic shop, I think that there is naturally a reaction to that for people who are interested in more alternative comics to want to do shops where like they don't even carry single issue comics, or that their big focus is only doing those kind of comics. And at the end of the day, like, ¿por qué no los dos? Like, why not do them both? It's, I think that people start shops where they don't want to feel judged for not knowing enough about Batman, but then suddenly customers feel judged for wanting to buy Batman, where they feel like, that the staff,
for wanting to learn more about Batman.
The staff is looking down on them because like they haven't read, the latest Michael DeForge book, and they're just asking about Green Lantern or whatever. That, it goes both ways. Gatekeeping can go kind of, both sides can do it. Exactly. It's the same, I grew up, listening to punk music, and I think what draws people to the punk ethos is that you feel like outsiders and you feel like you're accepting everyone who doesn't feel accepted. But then the punk scene inevitably has its own like uniforms that all the punks wear, and if you're not dressed how the rest of them are dressed, you're not accepted.
Well, even things like social cancellation came from the punk scene, right? That's really where that originated.
Yeah, and then also at the same time, the punk scene has always had its uncomfortable history with skinheads too. So like, it's. And that, it's, there's a lot. I mean, and I think, also, I mean, you asked me earlier about how we can be so political in our shop. I do think that being in DC specifically, if you live in DC, you're naturally you're paying more attention to the news than probably your average person, just because it affects your day-to-day life in a greater way.
Right.
I don't work for the federal government, but a ton of my customers do. And the reason I grew up in DC is because my dad was a career federal government employee, and all these businesses that exist off, when the government shut down, it's not just the federal employees who suffer. It's like all the businesses, all the restaurants that serve the federal employees, like all those people lose out on all their business too. But DC has always had a strong connection to its punk scene, going back to the 80s and 90s. Bad Brains, Fugazi, Minor Threat, that whole scene of people. Mm-hmm. DC Zine, Ian MacKay from Fugazi shows up to DC Zine Fest every now and then. The punk scene and the comic scene are interconnected in DC in a lot of ways. The indie comic scene in DC is very connected into the punk, like the zine culture in DC, and the zine culture comes from the punk scene. So I think that we're always going to have that connection there. But anyway, that was kind of an aside from what we were talking about.
No, it's good. I love that. That's exactly what I'm hoping for. All right, so that you hit a lot on selection, right?
Because that's a big piece selection. That's what we were talking about. Sorry. Let me. Yeah. So I guess what I wanted to say is we have a strong indie comic section, but we also have a strong superhero comic section, and we have a very strong manga section and manhwa and a bunch of other comics. And I've recently finally started ordering more light novels. Like, part of it is just
all in 1,300 square feet. I just want to note that,
yeah. I mean, we don't, there's, a lot of like long running manga. We can't have all 110 volumes of One Piece in stock at the same time. But I think that I personally think we have one of the best comic selections. I would put it up against any comic shop in the country. Even, I mean, bigger shops got more stuff, but I feel like we still curate things that they wouldn't think to carry. And then we try to have, I don't know, we try to, it's business 101 of diversifying your product. And the traditional superhero comics, because of the way that periodicals work, they give you a kind of a built-in weekly customer base it's very, punk zines are cool, but it's tough to build just like a weekly customer base off of that.
Yeah, it's true. People don't tend to show up
and then it's and also
for the latest punk zine drop.
Yeah, I mean, and I've got issues with corporate superhero comics too. Once you learn about how the sausage is made, there's a lot of stuff that's kind of ugly. But there is legitimately good stuff being made too. Absolute Martian Manhunter is one of the biggest comics at our shop, and that, like, anyone who loves indie comics would love that comic.
We're looking for a magazine that we're doing. We're looking at who are the biggest, most subscribed to, most pre-ordered writers, artists, cover artists, that sort of thing. Dennis Camp, writer of Martian Manhunter, actually outsold Scott Snyder.
Wow. Well, because he does he does Assorted Crisis events too, right?
Exactly, because he does all that other stuff, but Martian Manhunter does so well. Like, he's killing.
Yeah, well, and Javier Rodriguez, the artist. I mean, it's for me. Yeah. I'm definitely an art person. Like, I will put up with a mediocre story if the pictures are pretty enough.
Sure.
And I think I first read his work when he did some issues of Mark Waid's Daredevil run. And I think that whole kind of visual lineage. I mean, I think of Chris Samney and Marcos Martin and Paulo Rivera kind of all in the same category, who all worked on that Daredevil.
Oh, sure.
Who all worked on that Daredevil run that is still out of print, except for in the $100, $150 omnibus. I've been asking Marvel for years, please put out a new paperback of the Mark Waid Daredevil run.
Wow.
But anyway, Javier Rodriguez, absolute Martian Manhunter artist. It's been great to see people who have been introduced to his work through Martian Manhunter, who now the Zatanna comic he did right before that with Mariko Tamaki, Bring Down the House. Now that one's become a huge bestseller for us. Anyway, it makes me really happy to see. I feel like he's been in the industry for a long time, but at least in my shop, I think he's just now finally with Martian Manhunter starting to kind of get his due from the wider comics landscape.
Yeah. I feel like we hit that. I'm really curious though to part of me wants to run down the rabbit hole of you're obviously a cinematographer, not a screenwriter, and then talk about sound versus lettering and all of that, whatever.
I will say we do also, I mean, outside of the comics, the other part of diversifying our product stuff is that we do get is the gaming stuff as well, and cute merchandise. A big thing for us is that within the last couple of years, something that I learned in New York really, and now I've been applying here, is getting import cute Japanese plushies and stuff like Hello Kitty, Sanrio, Chikawa's Chikawa manga still hasn't been licensed for English print. I would love to see it, but getting that cute, I mean, that kind of stuff, because in New York there's a lot of places you can go and get cute Japanese items, but in DC there's some spots out in the suburbs that have that, but in the city itself currently there's still, I mean, I'm sure something Miniso or something will move in soon, but right now there's nowhere to get that stuff in DC. So it was a gap in the market. It expanded our customer base. And it's like, 100%. People who wouldn't, a lot of families come in, only one person in the family cares about comics. The rest of the family is staring at their phones. Now the people who are staring at their phones, they have stuff to look at now.
Yeah, exactly. We used to have what we called the girlfriend chair, and then slowly that got taken over by the girlfriend section, because we just found if we kept putting material over there that the girlfriend was going to be interested in, they stayed longer and they bought more.
Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah, I mean the boyfriend chair definitely exists too. I've been waiting outside the changing rooms at clothing stores.
100%. Okay, all right. Let's not get distracted. We're getting back to this Eisner layout. Okay. You talk a lot about community, right? Community is a big section for them. Talk about what you do. That you talk about how you have something almost every day of the month. What do you do outside? When I was doing the research, I saw on your YouTube channel there was a party for Halloween that looked like it was in another location. Can you talk about like how are you pushing out as opposed to like just drawing it?
Well, I think it's only within the last year now. I mean, we're only recently starting to really push outside Phantom. I think, you know, when I first came back, I was really focused on making Phantom itself, you know, as strong as it can be and kind of live up to its full potential and applying lessons I learned in the years that I was away. But we're at only 1,300 square feet. If we do an event with tables and chairs, the most people we can fit in there is like 24, 26. You know, people doing a workshop or people playing Magic the Gathering. And if we have no tables or chairs, if it's if we're hosting a concert, the most we can host is like 40 people. And our Halloween party every year is usually our biggest event of the year. We have to start turning people away because we're past our fire code regulation of how many people are supposed to be in there. And so this past year, which is Phantom's 20th anniversary of being in business, I'm like, okay, we should do something bigger. And I had come across DuPont Underground, which is this old abandoned underground trolley tunnel from the 1940s.
Cool.
That has been turned into this like nonprofit art space, and yeah, I mean it's really cool. Yeah, I reached out to them, and it's walking distance from Phantom, so it's great that I was able to find a venue where I knew they host a lot of art exhibitions and concerts and things like that there already, and it was a space where we could host a much bigger event, but also it wouldn't pull people away from our business too much because it's still in the neighborhood. So, even new people who were coming in who had never been to our shop, it's all kind of in the same area. But we're beginning to reach out to do stuff in other neighborhoods too. We're starting to do a little bit more pop-ups in other places. I'm beginning to organize a lot more events in other parts of the city, find new audiences. I mean, a lot of that is, it builds up, we're in the DuPont Circle neighborhood in DC. We're pretty close to downtown. But if you don't live or work around the neighborhood that we're at, a lot of people don't have any reason to ever go to where we are. Even if you live in the same city, if you live 2 neighborhoods away and, your daily life doesn't, have you walk past us, you have no reason to ever come by or learn that we exist in the first place. So I think a big part of doing events in other places is to let people know that we exist. So yeah, but I'm trying really hard to not bite off more than I can chew with it. And to me, our stuff that's at our main one location is being good is still always taking priority.
Next, these are just my observations. I don't know that they have their own like grading criteria, but these are just my own. Talk about what is innovative at Phantom. Like when you've been to a lot of comic shops, right? Clint, by the way, at the end of this interview, we're going to go back and talk about that. The parent, not quite murder, but let's talk about what makes Phantom different. What is the innovation that makes you unique? If you had to choose between Phantom and any other comic shop, why do you choose Phantom?
I think the community to me is without hesitation is the thing. There's other shops that have community. And I'm not saying that we're number one. We have the best community of any comic shop in the whole country, but it is.
You can say it if you want. Nobody's going to tell you different.
It's the thing that when people move away from DC, that they'll still come back. Or we have a lot of people who will still, they'll still get mail order comics from us, even though they have a shop wherever they are. Because they feel a connection to us because of the community. Which people who move somewhere else, I don't begrudge you finding a new comic shop. You're allowed to. This is a non-monogamous relationship. And people that move from other places, like I want them to start coming here. So like I don't, we lose out that business, but I don't begrudge them. That's just life. But I'm thankful to the people who do keep ordering stuff from us. Anyway, I think the community, and then I think our selection is very strong. I think we have a very well-rounded selection for comics, graphic novels, manga. Which I think for comparing to direct market shops, I'm still surprised at how many direct market shops struggle with manga.
I think it's a generational thing. For many of us, manga didn't come until later.
Yeah.
And so it's hard for us to really think of that as comics in the same breath as the comics that we have been dealing with our whole lives.
I mean, I guess one of the things that sets us apart is the way that we handle manga. At our shop, the manga is not separated into a different section. The manga is mixed in with the American comics based on genre. So the horror manga is next to the horror American comics, and the sci-fi manga is next to the sci-fi American comics, because manga is not a genre. It's just a nation of origin. And, it's just, manga is just the Japanese word for comics. It's all comics to me. And I don't really know any other shop that organizes their graphic novels together with the manga that way.
I've seen a couple. I did one. I mean, I think really early on when this is 2008, and this was way too early, 2007 or so, right? This was way too early for that. But we tried that. It wasn't, I don't know. As I remember, it wasn't terribly successful, but that was also 20 years ago. Yeah. So, things have changed.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I think and when we first did it, there were definitely customers who were not happy about it, because there's definitely people who are like, who come in and they're like, where's your manga section? At least the manga section. And so at first people don't like all the stuff.
Just scan the shelves, look for the short ones. It's simple.
Yeah, and we do always have the shelving issue, that because manga volumes are smaller, sometimes if they're mixed in, they'll get lost in the sauce of the spine out books, of the much bigger American books next to them. But I think part of what makes brick and mortar retail still relevant in a world where people could get everything on Amazon is that the experience of browsing, where you're not looking for something specific, but you're just browsing. You're able to do that physically in real life in a bookstore, or even like in a clothing store. You can look at the actual clothes and not just a picture of the clothes, in a way that you can't online. And I think that when people come in looking, so many comic readers they have cone vision of like, I only read American comics or I only read manga, and they won't even look at the other thing. When really, I feel like anyone who likes one of those would like the other one if they just open themselves up to and it goes both ways too. I mean, comics and American comics and manga have always been in dialogue with each other. Tezuka grew up reading Donald Duck comics.
And something about being around your energy just makes me feel old. It doesn't remind me of, we had this technique in our shop where we had different colored signs for different frequency of customer. So there for the people who we knew were going to be in weekly, we used like pink signs, and for the people we knew that were going to be in monthly, we used like blue signs, right?
And so on their pull box, or
well, no, there's on product on the shelf. So like there was a new this week that was pink. Also back in stock was pink, right? New last week is blue. Recommended reading is blue, because you may have missed it, right? And then we carried that throughout the shop. So that anything that we knew that a weekly customer might miss over here, we would just put that in pink, right? Yeah. And so I remember once doing that for, I don't remember, I think it was a manga, or it might have been some alternative press thing. And somebody said, hey, I don't know if you ever noticed, but like, I really do just look for the pink signs when I come in. Like I just figured out that this is how this is. Well, oh, that's cool. Right. And he goes, yeah, this doesn't really fit. And I said, yeah, but I wanted you to see it. That's why I did that. Well, no, you don't understand. I look for the pink signs, and that's not for me. I'm like, yeah, I do understand. I set that up, and I wanted you to see that. No, you don't get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think a big part of retail is getting people to try stuff they wouldn't normally try. We've been building up our web order business, and people getting their comics online is fantastic. But the thing that makes me sad about it, when they're not physically coming into the store, is that they will not have nearly as much of an opportunity to like have something else catch their eye that they wouldn't normally get.
Yeah. And it'd be just weird to like receive an email from my, mail order guy saying, hey, I noticed you're reading this, this, and this. Do you want this? That feels like an investment, me reading that email. You going, hey, did you look at this while I'm in there?
Yeah.
It's the same interaction. It just feels different.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
we definitely send our share of those marketing emails of like, you read this.
I'm sure you do.
But I think it's spam mail for a ton of people, and it's way more effective to be able to communicate that in person.
AI is going to take your job. That. I think we're closing in on the end here.
I can't have any conversation about anything for too long without it eventually circling around to how depressed I am.
AI is going to ruin this? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this wonderful thing, AI is going to ruin it. It's coming. It's happening.
I do have a little faith that it seems like a critical mass of people feel the same way, and I just like
Yeah.
I don't know. I hope that can counterbalance the Elon Musks of the world.
Well, I think that, having been at this for a while, there are certain parts of it that are going to be inevitable that you should learn, right? I mean, I use AI for a lot of the research that I do for these interviews. Why? Because I used to pay somebody a full day to do what I can get AI to do and with a properly worded prompt.
Yeah.
I do have to go in and double check it, but I had to double check their work too. So, there's that. And so some of that is going to be inevitable, but I don't think that just because they tell us it's going to be inevitable that AI is going to, AI is going to do this for you. I don't think that's necessarily the case.
Yeah, well,
yeah. I mean, yes, there will be robots making my food, but there's going to be a lot longer. During my lifetime, there's going to be plenty of real humans making my food.
Yeah, I recently
that's the case.
Yeah, I can understand AI's use for practical tasks, but for any creative task or kind of inherently human task, I think that's where AI concerns me a lot more. And I think the pushback against using AI in art comes from that. And
I think what you're going to see is going to be an interesting. This is my own pet theory about how comics fits in the ecosystem. But my own pet theory here is that in comics, many times we compete for the good artists, right? Specifically, the best artists. We often compete with video games and advertising and all of that. Like they'll come to comics and they'll get their chops and they get their skills up, and then the video game people see them and say, "Well, here's a bucket of money that comics people can never offer you."
Yes.
I think that kind of stuff is really what's going to be affected by AI. Is those video game companies are going to be the first to embrace, right? The advertising companies are the first to embrace.
Well, and those the big video game companies have all been laying off tons of people because of the AI. Yeah, you're right.
Exactly. So yeah, I think that's where it's really going to change it. Is that we're going to see people be forced. I'm going to saying this in with bunny ears. They're going to be forced to stay in our industry and find the career that they, that is sustainable and actually allows them to succeed inside of our career, inside of our ecosystem, which is what you actually is a good metaphor for you, because you tried to go out. You said, I wanted to get, but the truth is this is where you were born to be planted. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to close the doors to anything for me in the future. But I know that whatever I build, whether it's, I do think there's a future where I am just building Phantom forever and making it my dream business. I am interested at some point in the future getting into small press publishing as well. And I've thought about if I would want to do that through Phantom or through something else. But I know that I wouldn't. There's a lot of bookstores who also publish that I feel like it ends up coming at the expense of the bookstore. Because you can tell all their creative time and energy is going into the publishing side of it. And it's just like running two businesses. But I've seen with Mysterious Bookshop that like it can be done.
Might be part of why it works, right? A Mysterious Bookshop may not still be there if it wasn't for the publishing. I will say I've heard from plenty. We've had Avi from Silver Sprocket here on the show. And I would say that many people have pointed towards Silver Sprocket as a model that is the only way it would succeed inside of San Francisco. A lot of other San Francisco shops really struggle. And part of the reason that Silver Sprocket is able to sell the kind of product they do is because of their publishing. Like their profit models are different.
That is very true. Yeah. But Silver Sprocket, the bookstore, has been having major financial issues lately. I think they recently had to start another fundraising.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so to me, it's like I do have kind of a far off dream of publishing some comics, but but still the shop itself and the community itself is always going to be priority. And I won't do anything else unless that can come. Yeah. And I could be at Phantom for the rest of my life, or I could, I don't know, maybe I'll go off and do something else. But I know that building Phantom is the foundation for whatever I'm going to do.
Or maybe you'll get the call to go back to Mysterious Bookshop.
Mysterious Bookshop told me that Otto Penzler, he bought me dinner when I left, and then he said, "I understand why you're leaving, but I'm never going to hire you again." So I mean, I left Masira's bookshop.
All right, then.
He was happy with me, and then I left to get some publishing job again, and then I just got laid off. Again,
Yeah.
so
At least he's not gonna. At least not he's gonna get back with you
yeah,
just to break up with you again. Right? Yeah.
yeah.
All right.
I don't know if I have it in me to go back to the other company a third time.
Please don't. Don't do that to yourself. Okay, so a couple closing questions we ask for everybody. What is the thing that you think is the biggest risk for comics, the industry, the direct market, however you want to define it? What do you think is the biggest risk that's facing us today?
I mean, it's hard not to think about some of these AI stuff that we were just talking about. I mean, kind of to your point of what you had just been talking about, I think that comics have always existed in the shadow of bigger industries. And even before AI, there's never been much money in comics. There's always a certain number of people that you're like, oh, this is just your screenplay that you wanted to get made into a movie, but you couldn't sell the rights yet, so you made a comic. Sometimes those movie rights are sold before the first issue even comes out.
Correct.
And I think, and then also, I mean, look at page rates for comic artists. Artists could make more money doing pretty much any other kind of professional illustration than drawing interior comic pages. But somehow people still make comics. And somehow people still open comic book stores when it's like, if you just wanted to make money, there's many other things you could do that would make more money. And I think as a result, the people, both on the retailer side and the creative side, I think the only people who stick around in comics do it because they care about it. Because if you're in it for the money, you're going to go do something else. So I guess that's a danger to comics, but also maybe is a strength as well.
What gives you hope? What keeps you doing this?
That people are still putting out great comics, that with all the hell going on in the world, that like there's, part of why we had a great year this past year is that there's just a lot of really good comics coming out. DC's Absolute books have been, Saga was our best-selling comic for the last decade, in trades and in single issues. By far, nothing else even came close for 10 years, 12 years. But now just within the last month, Absolute Batman passed Saga and finally became our first book that had more subscribers than Saga.
Wow. That's a big day.
Yeah. I don't want to divulge too much proprietary data, but we have over 100 subscribers for Absolute Batman. And that's, for us, for a small store, that's, sure. Saga was the only, we had a few other books that come close every now and then. When Ta-Nehisi Coates was writing Black Panther, it came very close. But we have not had anything nearly on that level. And then the other Absolute books have been great too. And then outside of that, there's amazing indie comics coming out. Piao Studio, my favorite indie publisher, they're putting out amazing things. Bulgilhan Press, Glacier Bay Books is like translating indie manga. Paradise Systems is introducing like indie Chinese comics, which I didn't, like 5 years ago, I didn't really know that there was a huge indie comic scene in China. And then the manga getting way more mainstream, way more manga, new and old manga getting published in English for the first time. There's exciting stuff people are coming in for. I feel like I know like all levels of comics, graphic novels, manga, manhwa, whatever. There's just really good creative stuff coming out, and I don't know, that makes me hopeful.
How should people find you? Where would you like them to interact? Do you have, more specifically, do you have any sort of call to action for the people listening that may or may not have anything to do with Phantom?
You can find us at Phantom Comics, Phantom with an F, on most social media, on Instagram, on Blue Sky, on Facebook. We don't have a TikTok yet. I don't know if that's coming. But it's just the name of our store there. The Instagram is definitely the thing that we're most active on. And that would be where I would for sure keep up with that's where you can keep up with everything that we're doing. A lot of it is us kind of supporting the local scene, but even if you don't live in the DC area, I don't know, we do fun stuff. We're always we try to have some personality behind it, because we know that if you're following a business social media account, like to a certain extent, it's all just a giant ad for buy stuff from us. And I think I realized that in my own social media viewing. So I try to inject as much humanity into our social media as I can to show that it's like real people advertising stuff that they actually care about.
Thank you. Thank you, Jacob. I really appreciate your time today. This has been really fantastic. And keep it up, man. I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing you in Glendale in a few weeks. I don't know when this episode's.
Yeah, thank you. I'm honored to be on here. I know there's been a lot of really cool people who've been on here before me. Yeah, I guess I'll see you at Comics Pro next month. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. You got it. See you there. Jim Kavanaugh, the longtime owner of Clint's Comics in Kansas City, Missouri, died on May 12, 2017, after being injured during a confrontation with a thief who had stolen comic books from the store. Witnesses reported that Kavanaugh, armed with a handgun, chased the suspect. Armed with a handgun, chased the suspect into the back parking lot where the man's vehicle backed up and struck Kavanaugh with the passenger door. That's not funny. Why did I laugh?
Oh, this is very sad.
He fell. It is very sad. He fell, he hit his head, and he suffers a fatal heart attack as a result of the fall. The incident occurred at 12:30 p.m. at 39th and Walnut Streets.
You know, I shouldn't smile because I'm a comic shop owner. Like, this could happen to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you would chase the guy down.
I guess, you know,
I have.
I guess you just got to smile because if it's going to happen, it's going to happen, and there's nothing I can do about it.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's a crazy world out there. And you don't.
It really is.
It is dangerous. Something I don't hear about every day.
Feel free when we read the transcript to tell us to not use this part, but I kind of like this as a.
No, I like, of course, my condolences to his family and the whole like Kansas City comics community, and I hope that I know there is a big comic scene in Kansas City.
Truly,
and it's really sad to see, but in a comic storytelling kind of way, it's like, I don't know, maybe I'd rather go out like that than go out a lot of other ways it could happen.